This is Wayne, and we're going to talk about some PLC tips and tricks. There's two ways of developing PLCs in SOLIDWORKS Electrical. The first way is by inserting a symbol using the Insert Symbol feature. By utilizing this method, you're given access to hundreds of PLCs that have already been pre-developed. Now you can add to or modify this list as well. Once selected, you then can add your manufacturer information to your PLC. Now I like to have my automatic refresh checked on. That way it updates my search list as I modify my filters. However, you want to make sure that you have the appropriate classification, and if you're not sure which classification you're using, just turn the In the Class off by checking this box. You'll see that when I add my manufacturer part, it drives all the way down to the part that I'm looking for, which is great. The benefits of utilizing this method is that if I have a specific way I want my PLCs to be shown, or if my customers specify the way the PLC needs to be shown, I can develop a symbol that allows me that standardization or the customization of this symbol. The problem with this symbol is that it's restricted to the amount of I/O that I have pre-developed for it. Another method of inserting PLCs is by using a dynamic symbol. By right-clicking on my location, I then can insert a PLC symbol by mark or by manufacturer part. By inserting a PLC using the mark, I'm just designating that there will be a PLC in my design, but I'm not necessarily sure of the manufacturer part yet. That could be because I might have some I/O that could change, or maybe there's a long lead time on the PLC that the customer is specifying, so we're not necessarily sure which manufacturer part we're going to go with. The other method is when you absolutely know what manufacturer you're going to use. By utilizing this method, I can develop my symbol based on the manufacturer information that I'm going to use. Now that I have my PLC symbol in my component tree, I could actually drive my bill of materials without having ever put a symbol in my schematic. When I'm ready to insert my PLC into my schematic, I simply right-click on it and go to Insert PLC. When I'm in here, I want to make sure that I first turn on the I/O points that I want to use. I do that by highlighting the I/O that I want to have activated. Once highlighted, I right-click on it and I go to Add a new input/output. You'll notice that now in my mnemonic value, I have these I/O descriptors from 1 to 6, specifying that my I/Os have now been activated. Now if I decide I don't want to show any other I/O, I can actually turn those off by unclicking this little light here. So I'll turn off all of my outputs for right now. Great. So now I can bring my PLC into my schematic. But you know what? This PLC is going to be an output, so I want to flip it upside down. I do that by clicking on the channel direction. Once selected, I've now flipped my PLC. You see now that I have my PLC with all my manufacturer information, as well as my I/Os that have all been turned on. and the rest of my IOs that I'm not necessarily using right now, but I still have those inputs visible and none of my outputs are showing. Now, if I decide that I want to modify this PLC by adding some description to my PLC, I simply right click on the symbol and go to Edit PLC. When in this interface, I now want to highlight the PLC IO points that I want to add description to. When those are highlighted, I go to Input Outputs. I want to expand and select the IO that I'm using. Now that I have those selected, I want to go up here and click on the data grid. In here, I can actually copy out Excel information and insert into my PLC. Typically, the weaknesses of a PLC design lies within the design of its schematic. This should not be of a surprise, as it's a meticulous task that's not only time-consuming but also carries the risk of human error. So typos or wrong information can result in undesirable outcomes, which could be costly. So by copying out information from your Excel spreadsheet and inserting it into your PLC here, you're ensuring that you're going to reduce the possibilities of errors and drastically minimize your design time. I have here this list of PLC IO points, and when selected, I can actually add that to my PLC. Now you'll notice that my PLC now has a IO address information as well as the description of what my IO is actually going to do inside my design. Now there's a much quicker way of actually inserting your PLC in SOLIDWORKS Electrical. If I decided that I didn't want to insert the PLC myself and also generate the drawing, I can actually do that right from the PLC insert feature. By clicking on Generate PLC Drawings, I can actually generate the drawing and the PLC as well as all the circuitry that's associated to it. In order to do that, I first have to have a few things set up in advance. You first want to set up your PLC drawings configurations. So here I can identify that my default PLCs are going to basically look like this. However, I can also specify for other particular types of PLCs, maybe analog or digital, how I want those PLCs to look. For my output PLC, I can actually designate that I want all of my circuitry to look like such. and all of my description will look like such. And I can modify this by either clicking on this star here where I can actually select the circuit that I'm looking for. I can either delete it completely out, or I can actually go in and edit how I want that symbol to look, or this circuit to look. Once defined, you'll see that this is how my PLC will look. Let's see what that looks like. So now when I go to insert my PLC, instead of clicking Insert PLC, I click Generate PLC Drawings. It's going to ask me, do I want to insert it in this book of this project? And if I say OK, it'll actually go through and create the pages for me, put my PLCs down, it'll add the manufacturer information, as well as all the circuits that are associated to it. So now you'll see that I had 2 additional pages of PLC drawings added. My PLC was laid down. The manufacturer information was inserted for me. My description is still available, as well as the circuitry for the I/O that I turned on. The benefit of using a dynamic PLC symbol is that in the event you need to go and make any modifications to your PLC, you can do that on the fly. Notice that when I inserted my PLC, I identified my I/O points as inputs. However, I specified this as being an output card. So if you notice right now, my I/O are I1 through I6. Well, that's actually incorrect, and they should be Q1 through Q6 because they're output. I can simply modify that by going to Edit PLC. Once highlighting those I/Os, I can right-click and go to Modify Channel Address. And here I can change those input channel addresses to outputs. And for this instance, that's a Q. So now by quickly going in and modifying those channel address, the information on my PLC has now been appropriately updated. And so now you see I have Q1 through Q6. My name is Wayne, and until the next time.